So, we are talking about what today? We are looking at what we believe about what the Apostles' Creed talks about when it says the resurrection of the body, and what that means and what that looks like. And specifically then, it really is about life, the universe, and everything, right? It's that idea of how we fit everything that is in the world and everything that we know about God into this mindset that we have of what it means to be living that way. How we feel, how we fit even more specifically, something we've been talking about the last 2 weeks, the idea of heaven and hell. Now, 2 weeks ago, I talked about the idea of hell. And I gave you 3 of the words. Do y'all remember at all what they were? Sheol, good. Hades, Gehenna. Very good, well done. Together we make up one brain. Yay, so we got that going for us. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about what happens to all of us and then about when we go to heaven, what it looks like, what happens there, and all that sort of thing. And to do that, I want to use the book of Revelation. I know, right? Now, Revelation, it's important to note, is a book with a specific type of literature. And it's really important that we think about what that means. It is called an apocalypse. Now, you hear that word bandied around an awful lot. You know, the end times, everybody says that's an apocalyptic moment. And when most of us say that word, what we mean is everything's falling apart, everything's destroying. It's just terrible, terrible stuff. That's not what the word apocalypse means. The word apocalypse means revealed. And so, for example, if you have a bad back, okay, and your bad back is because maybe, certainly there could be injuries and those sorts of things to it, but it gets worse and worse and worse. It gets exacerbated by stress, right? So when your back pops, it could be the muscles or those sorts of things, but it also could be the stress that you're under. So in that particular situation, your back going out is an apocalypse of the stress that you were under. You with me? So it's that idea of it showing us an important thing of what's going on within the world. It means revealing, which is why the book of Revelation is called Revelation. Okay? So as such, the book of Revelation is poetry, or more specifically, an apocalypse, a type of literature. It is not teaching upon which we can craft a system or create a church. And that's an important thing for us to remember about that. It is much more along the lines of a poem. It is much more along the lines of a song which elicits an emotion within us. So that's important. Now, in this case, what we're talking about today, that Revelation is revealing, it is revealing where our ending is, but it's not revealing it from the standpoint of when you die and you go to heaven, you take a picture, you take a video, you take your phone along, and your phone, filming as you go along, that this is what it's going to look like. Okay? It's all along the lines of what is God trying to reveal to us? What's happening in there? What is God wanting us to see? What is God wanting us to hear? What is God wanting us to feel? And tactily, because remember I talked about in the confession, that's an important part of the Christian faith and the Jewish faith, is that idea of we feel, we hear, we taste, we sense. And what we see as the book progresses from the dragon and all the different things that go on through there, what we see is God's rule in full operation. God's rule in full operation. In other words, heaven. But this is important because we have built up all this system about what heaven is. It's pearly gates, right? It's clouds. It's people walking around. When you die, you become an angel. You don't become an angel, okay? Angels are angels. Dodgers are Dodgers. And so... Oh, really? Okay, come on. Some of you at home are laughing. You've got to be. In other words, heaven. But again, it's not about the end. And that's important for us to know about. Heaven is not just about the end. Heaven is also about right now. Throughout the Bible, heaven is a metaphor. And when I use that word, a lot of people hear the word metaphor and they go, so you're saying it's not true. No, a metaphor tells a deeper truth. Okay? It's like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. Or, when he does that, I chopped it down for I could not lie. What are we being told from that? That George Washington was not a politician, right? Because he couldn't tell a lie. But in any case, what's going on there is that it's a metaphor for what we are striving for and what we can have right here and right now. And metaphors say there's much more about heaven than just going up to the clouds and doing those sorts of things. There's far more about what we see in heaven than what we feel and experience here on this earth. Throughout the Bible, we are told that God is right here, right now. And stop and think about that. God is in this place. God is present with us at this moment. His rule, his love, his mercy, his judgment, his salvation are right here, right now. His mercy, his grace, his healing, his wisdom are right here, right now. We are living in the midst of that. Now, the other thing that happens that's a problem for us when we think about the word heaven is that when we use the word heaven, we're trying to figure out, well, what do we actually mean by that? Our faith grandparents used one word for heaven where our English words, we use two. We use sky and we use heavens. So we say, I'm looking up into the sky, the blue or sometimes brown aspect above us, and we think of sky. And then when we think of sky, or heaven rather, we think of that invisible realm, that invisible place that we don't know anything about. And so it seems separate from us. It seems different from us. But our faith grandparents used context to understand what it was that they were talking about. And where we might come up the idea of the clarity, we thin out the comprehensiveness of it. So our faith grandparents, when they used heaven, they were not thinking along the lines of something separate. They were thinking of something right here and right now. And so that's important for us to grasp hold of as well. What does it mean for us to have that idea? So flip over in your Bibles to Revelation chapter 21. Revelation is the last book of the Bible, in case you didn't know. 21 is almost the end of the book. You got one more chapter after that, kind of wrapping things up. And what we have here is we have this idea of one of the most comforting verses in Scripture. This is one of my go-to verses. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, or see, the home of God is among mortals. And he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with him. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away. And the one who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And then he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And then he said to me, It is finished. It is done. It is accomplished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water as a gift from the spring of the waters of life. And those who conquer will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. The word of the Lord. So what do we have? We have this image of a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Now, we'll deal with the passed away thing in just a second here. But the idea of, does that mean there's no oceans in heaven? You can't take a walk by the ocean? Yeah, right? That's not what that means. See, this is an accommodation to ancient peoples who were afraid of the ocean. Why were they afraid of the ocean? Because they couldn't see in there, right? They were seafaring people, but if you look at the coast of the Mediterranean and all other ancient sites, what you'll find is that you have these areas. Every one of these areas is a day's sail across from one port to another port to another port to another port. So they were afraid of the ocean. So that's why it says there was no sea anymore. It's an accommodation for that process. But then it goes on to say that the first earth and the first heaven had passed away. And when we hear that word, we go, aha! That means it's burned up, right? To a crackly crunch. Everything's destroyed, and now we get to stand in heaven with Jesus. What a great idea. No, that's not what that means. The Greek word that John uses here at this point means to arrive at a destination. It means to arrive at a destination. So stop and think of what that means. The first heaven and the first earth, where we all think of going when we die, and where we might live in the future, they are not destroyed. They have arrived. If I go down to First Street down here and I get on a train, actually I have to go out to the airport to do what I'm going to do. If I go out to the airport and get on a train, see, I knew you guys would I didn't want to mess with you. And I get on that train in Burbank, and I get off the train in Santa Barbara. I am still, my Burbank self has not been destroyed, right? My Burbank self is still who I am. But what I have done is I have become my Burbank self in Santa Barbara. So I have arrived at my destination, in other words. And so what we have here is a genre of literature that is referred to as fulfillment language. In other words, God is he is fulfilling his promise of not destroying the world, like turning it over like an Etch-a-Sketch, but rather bringing it all home. That's the image that we're being given. The old is fulfilled by the new. So what's the image that we have? The image is that I saw the holy city coming in the New Jerusalem, he defines it as. The New Jerusalem coming out of heaven for God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Now you'll notice our revealed focus isn't Jerusalem, it's her status. Now first of all, Christians, don't think of Jerusalem as the holy city anymore. It was the holy city. In the Old Testament, the sacred scriptures, that's the image that we are given. But the holy city is now Christ's church. We are Jerusalem. That's who we get to be. So now take that image of the church, as imperfect and as it is, and now dress that church in what it should be. When I talked about it in the confession a few minutes ago, that whole idea of the fact that we are to enjoy life. We're to be involved in the abundant life. That's what we're now being told. And so what do we have? Jerusalem, the church, is dressed as what? A bride, right? That's the image that we are given. I'm going to go to a wedding in a couple of weeks here for Jacob Motz. Yeah, he's getting married. And I get to talk at that wedding, and I'm so joyful and grateful for that. So that's what we're being told. Our focus isn't Jerusalem. Our focus isn't even the church. It's her clothing, or if you will, her status. Again, poetry. That's what we're reading here. It's poetry. Jerusalem is a bride, the church is a bride, and in the poetry of the text, we, Christ's church, are now given the privilege of being the bride of Christ. We are the New Jerusalem. The Bible's go-to illustration for intimate relationships is almost always marriage. Almost always. In the first view of God's fulfillment, it isn't wealth, it isn't righteousness, it is God showing off his beloved bride of whom he is proudest. Imagine that you went to visit the estate of a really, really rich man who doesn't proudly tour you around the digs that he has, showing his $180,000 television or his Lamborghini or any of that kind of stuff, or his gardens. What does he do? He pulls and he introduces us to his bride. If you're meeting a really, really rich person who's introducing you to his bride, you'd know an awful lot about that person, wouldn't you? So too with God. And that's why in verse 3, we have that idea of, I then heard a loud voice coming from the throne saying, behold, or see, the voice, or the home of God is among mortals. And he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them. Now, once again, this is more fulfillment language. And it's fulfillment of the book of Jeremiah. And in the book of Jeremiah, we read this: I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and Judah. A new covenant to replace the covenant that they broke. You broke it, you fix it. No, you broke it, I fix it. Though I was their husband. What is that covenant? It is a covenant of my law within them. Of my law within them, written on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they will know me from the least to the greatest. And I will forgive all their iniquity and remember their sin no more. And so the impediments between God and us are destroyed. They are gone. The law is fulfilled. We don't need it any longer. At least as an exterior understanding, because we have the lawgiver inside of us. The lawgiver is walking with us. We now live in an era of grace, and we see without impediment. And that's why when Jesus is asked about marriage in heaven, he says, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. And some of us go, yes. And some of us go, what? What's that? Jesus does not mean that heaven is a singles bar. You go around wherever you want to. But he also doesn't mean it's a monastery. See, you got to look back. What's the purpose of marriage? Purpose of marriage is to boundary and protect and to hold dear relationships. That's the goal, right? That's what we hope for. In a fulfilled heaven, there's no need. We don't need to have that. So, to sorrow. In verse 4, it says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain are no more. These things are put away. See, John, again, visions heaven. He describes heaven as a fulfilled place. He envisions it as a place that you and I already know. A place with water and mountains. Maybe not an ocean, right? Water and mountains, trees, fruit, metals. Talks about the jewels that are there. Again, it's not that it's not like we get up there and look, oh, diamonds. They're just, but he's giving us images for it. Food, distances that can be recorded, doorways that can be counted. The symbolism is completion, not absorption. Fulfillment, not destruction. Fulfillment of what we see now, and this is important, fulfillment of people. In verse 12, it says, where I didn't go down on this far with you, but the gates are inscribed the names of the 12 tribes. In verse 14, it says, and on the walls are inscribed the names of the 12 apostles. So what does that mean? It means people are important in heaven. I find it extremely comforting that we are all still as important in heaven, because it is people. It is people who will make up the bride of Christ. And people are important. All people are important. We are not assimilated into some collective. Resistance is not futile, right? We continue as who we are. People live on in our memory. And as such, they are important. People are important. On this Father's Day, I miss my father. Been gone for 13 years. And I just would love to give him a hug, right? And you all have those images within your life. People are remembered as who they are and who they were. Imperfect, but fulfilled. not destroyed, not spiritualized, but made who they were created to be. You see, Revelation reminds us that everything in history is retrievable, that nothing ends. The first law of thermodynamics states that though energy can be converted from one form to another, it remains a constant. It can neither be created nor can it be destroyed. And as we think about what that means, we think about the idea that nothing is destroyed in this understanding of ends or heavens or anything like that. What we find is that everything continues. And we live in that hope. We live in that joy. I love Nivla. She's such a great gift to myself and to Christ's church. I enjoy who she is. I love Bob. I love Brian. I love all of you, and I love you because of who you are primarily, the way you test me and challenge me and all that sort of thing, but also the fact that we get to spend the rest of eternity together. You know, every so often we'll have some things that happen around the church where somebody will say, I can't be at that church anymore and I have to leave that church. Stop and think how silly that is. Because you're going to spend eternity together, and then you're going to walk around feeling embarrassed. I don't think you will. So when the creed says the resurrection of the body, that means that this is it, kids. This is who we are. Now, what does that mean? That, Jesus' body at the resurrection was different, right? He could walk through walls all of a sudden. That's weird. But he still had nail holes. So the pains that were there were there. So we don't know what that means. We're not supposed to know what it means. So what happens then? Do we die and go immediately to heaven? We don't know. We don't know. And then there's that idea of, well, if our bodies are in heaven, we certainly shouldn't cremate somebody, right? My father and my mother and my sister are on my shelf in my office because nobody can quite decide what to do. So was that a bad move? Should we plot in them somewhere? I think God's got this. I think God can kind of do whatever God's going to do on this. But here's the important thing, and this is where rubber meets the road, because the thing is, none of us know what happens between the time we die and the time that we stand before the throne of God. We don't know. Heck, we don't know what's going to happen between now and Tuesday, right? But here's the thing. If this is so important to God, and if this plays some role in what our eternity is going to look like, don't we want to take care of this? Yesterday I was coming off the 134, the 101. I guess it's the 134 at that point. You don't care. In any case, I was getting off at Bob Hope Drive, and I looked at the bushes around me, filled with trash, filled with junk. And I thought, why can't we do something about that? We, not the government. They got their hands full. But we can. So I can pick up a piece of paper, right? I can try to live a life that is more eco-friendly for everything that's going on, because God created this world, and for me to trash it is sort of spitting on God, isn't it? On his creation. I can keep my relationships clean. I can keep my side of the street clean. I can love everyone because God himself loves everyone. And I can live that life, thus bringing heaven right now. A little closer, a little more here.